Is humility hurting you? Because it is. I've struggled with that. I remember one of my business coaches a decade ago asked me, because I talked about, the professional speaking, and I really struggle with the self-promotion because I never want to be seen as egotistical. And he just looked at me and he said, so you're telling me you're willing to withhold the gifts that you've got to give because you're afraid of being seen as egotistical? And I just went, oh shit.
If not accepting my gifts and my opportunity that it brings me to do service, I'm not doing it to my own benefit. If I withhold that because, like you said, because I'm scared of looking a certain way, well, then you're not doing it for the right reasons.
Hey, I'm Mike Cameron.
And I'm Trevor Botkin.
And we're not changing much, but we're changing a couple of things. Trevor and I are going to be the new host for the Don't Change Much podcast. We're going to have some conversations. We're going to get real. We're going to do our best to drop the mask, drop the armor, and just get real.
Yeah. Let's dig into some shit and carry on.
You know what they say, strangers are just friends you haven't met yet. So.
Yeah, right. I've learned one thing in in my career in the trades and in life, and especially in recovery, it's the human connection is where it's at. I love people. I love getting to know people. And fortunately in my recovery from my own challenges, I've found a new depth and a new sense of comfort in getting to know people, like past what we see on the outside. And to that end, Mike, I'm pleased to meet you. I'm pleased to be hosting this with you. What do you tell me about yourself? I'm excited.
I'm just a dude. I'm a dad. I've had some trauma in my life that sort of sent me down this path of having the conversations around what does it really mean to be a dude, and how can we show up as men, and how do I want to show up as a man? And it's really, for the last decade, has sent me down a path of some really fascinating conversations. So yeah, you and I got to spend a couple of minutes together last week, and I'm just stoked to be able to have these conversations with you as we build this thing out and develop this thing and just see what happens. So tell me a little bit about you. Again, this is the beauty. We don't really know each other.
Yeah, no, we don't. And, it's interesting because you touched on something there that is important to point out, is like the choice in that. Like, we get a choice in how we show up in the world. And I think for many years, and this ties into my own personal journey, I knew I wasn't showing up as the man I wanted to be. I felt very trapped, but somehow being different than the way I was and the way I was showing up felt very disingenuous and dishonest, but I knew I wasn't satisfied with it and I could do better. I knew there was something better inside of me. I just didn't know how to get there. And so, but realizing now the simplicity of it is that I just need to make the choice and find the resources I need to show up different, be different. And that's going to mean I'm going to feel different. I'm going to feel out of my place. I'm going to feel like a rookie in my own life. But inevitably, eventually you get to a place where that just becomes genuine in your default mode. And so looking back, I come through an adult, a sort of a tough childhood and not fitting in, not belonging, didn't do well in school, found my way into trades like a lot of people do with my background. Found alcohol and drugs at a very young age. Those were my coping tools. That's what allowed me to find myself, really. And a very genuine version of myself. There's still a big part of that guy in me. But inevitably what turned it from like a coping tool that I could manage turned into a lot of really challenging circumstances to me. And then coupled with this identity of needing to deliver and produce and get things done and take on challenges and not say no. All of these things led to me, I can't sugarcoat this, man. On March 6, 2019, I was ready to take my life. I was going to take my life, and through some minor miracles, I ended up in a treatment center the next day, and that set me on the path to self-discovery and just open-mindedness and willingness to change that I I find myself here today. And like you have found some time in an advocacy role, put myself out there, my story out there, and just trying to impact the lives of others. Cause I'm sure you will attest, like we're not that unique, right? Like we've seen some trauma. Your situation is very unique. Mine's a little unique. Everybody, but our feelings kind of are all the same. And I see guys trapped in this shit, man. Like, and it's tough to watch, especially on the other side when you know it's like, it's just some hard work.
All of our stories are unique. We don't have to compare our stories. We don't have to compare our struggles. But the beautiful thing is, we don't have to struggle alone.
Yeah.
And we're not alone. Like that to me is the magic. And I love what you talked about, sort of that, the choice of the gap between who I'm showing up as, the mask I'm wearing, the representation of a dude that I'm putting out there, the gap between that and who I really am. And to me, it's about closing that gap so that what you see is what you get. And this is the real me. Yeah. And, I think you used the word simple. It's simple as making a choice. Yeah. It's simple, but it's not that easy. It takes a lot of work.
You bring up some things there too, is like that hyper independence that I grew up under, like this idea that, you can take care of yourself. You got to do everything. But the antithesis is like looking at an army, looking at anything that has to go to battle or work hard. There's always a team built around that. No general goes to war by themselves. You don't see one person building a multi-story building or a one-story building. There's a team there. We do things with our teams, with our community, with other people. So this idea that I held that I can't ask for help, I have to do it myself, is a fallacy. It's just not accurate. Nobody does things by themselves. And navigating mental health challenges and for me, my substance use challenges, that was a battle, man, that I needed to get knowledge that I didn't have. I needed people around me to support me through that. And I needed to be open to being vulnerable with those people, because if you can't talk about it, if you can't identify it, if you can't do the work to be curious and source it out, it's impossible to get a hold of these things. It really is.
I still struggle with the asking for help. I kind of, even in this world, as I do this work, I have to be very mindful of, okay, it doesn't have to be your idea. You can take Trevor's idea and run with it and evolve it. And he can have good ideas, and you're okay just as you are. And that's one of the things I'll circle back to in a minute. But I still have this, well, I'm going to get better first, and then I'll ask for help.
Because, what a paradox.
Right? Yeah. And it's just nuts, but I still find myself doing that. Yeah. Well, but I think even just sort of embarking on this journey with that mindset is important, because what I see for myself and for a lot of the guys that I've worked with is, you're right, we get into the deep end without realizing it, and then we realize we're in the deep end. But for me, that comes back to that, okay, well, I'm just going to paddle back to the shallow end before I ask for help, because I'm embarrassed or ashamed that I got myself in the deep end.
Right.
And that is such a big piece.
It is
to let go of that shame. And that's like, oh, Jesus, I get goosebumps as I go down this path in my head.
Yeah.
But it's really, the only way to get rid of that is to shine a light on it.
Right.
It's like mold. It grows in the darkness.
Totally. And I'm getting goosebumps because I know enough of your story to know how that's impacted your life, not in your own self, but by way of somebody else that was going through some tough stuff. Maybe, if you don't mind, if you're comfortable,
of course,
share a bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, it was a decade ago now. In 2015, my girlfriend was murdered by an ex-boyfriend who subsequently took his own life. And that was, at that time, folks knew I was an advocate, a champion for change. And so there was a lot of folks that wanted me to go after the justice system and talk about, how do we fix that? How do we build a better restraining order? And I just thought, that's the wrong, we're talking about putting a Band-Aid on a ruptured jugular.
Yeah.
And maybe the other question is, how do we get to a point where men don't get to that point in the first place? And like that, obviously that's the far end of the deep end that we're talking about. So
Yeah.
how do we throw men a life preserver while they're still in the shallow end,
Yeah.
so that we can reel them back in? And to me, that is what became my mission. And I think I told you, my mission, I'm committed to empowering a community of emotionally connected leaders who inspire men to feel more so they can be more and ultimately do more.
I first of all want to recognize how heartbreaking that is, and thank you for sharing. I so sorry for your loss, and but also I just want to recognize too, like the plane, the higher plane to which that your reaction to that is like I get a very sort of a violent leaning reaction when I hear that part of your story. And I know it's not helpful, but that's like, I mean, I don't think I'm abnormal in that. But I just want to point out like how the level of emotional maturity or literacy you have to be able to look at it through that lens. And yeah, hurt people, and healed
Yes.
men are safer men. And when we, have good community and solid outlets, and we can be vulnerable, and we have good people we can confide in, we likely don't hurt people like that.
Some of that for me was that curiosity piece and staying open and having the right people at the right time come in the right places. So one of the biggest things for me that shifted my perspective on this was a friend of mine shared a letter from a fellow by the name of Ram Dass. Ram Dass was an American spiritual leader. He wrote a letter. It's called A Letter to Rachel. It's worth Googling. It's
Okay.
Paragraphs long. Rachel it was a young girl who had been murdered. He had sent this letter to her parents, and a friend of mine sent me this letter the day after Colleen was killed. And when I read that, there were like three things that stuck out in that. He said, "Is anyone strong enough to remain conscious through such teachings as you are receiving? Probably very few." And when I read that, that was like, oh shit, like I need to take that, as you called it, the higher plane. Like I need to remain conscious through these teachings. I could dive back into my business and work the shit out of my life and ignore things that way. I could dive into a bottle. I could, there was all kinds of different things. But when I read that, I realized that was what I needed to do. Yeah. And this second piece he said was, our rational minds will never understand what has happened, but our hearts, if we keep them open, will find their own intuitive way. And again, I was getting stuck in the why. And there's no rational answer to that question.
There is no rational answer. None.
No. And then the last one he said that was probably the most impactful. He said in that letter, "Now is the time to let your grief find expression. No false strength." And when I think of us dudes, like, how often do we put up that false strength?
Right.
It's like, no, I'm good, dude. No, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. Wow.
And often we're just not.
No. And I don't know how you would be good, like, in that situation. And I just to back up just a moment, I feel bad bringing Colleen into our conversation today on the darkest day of her life and not shining some light on the love and life side. Tell me, if you're okay, tell me a bit about Colleen.
Yeah, absolutely. She was a yogi, a potter, a painter, a photographer, an artist. She just, I'll share one quick story that I think sort of sums it up. We had lots of philosophical conversations. We listen to podcasts and read books and have some deep and meaningful conversations. And one of my favorite conversations was on the topic of talent. And I remember asking her, what do you think your talent is? And she said, "Oh, I make things beautiful," which she absolutely did. She had a knack for seeing the beauty in the world. Again, as an artist, she made things beautiful. And then she turned the question around. She said, "What do you think your talent is?" And I said, I don't know. Like I've been successful, but I don't know that I have a particular talent. I said, what do you think my talent is? She said, oh, that's easy. You've got a much more useful talent. I said, oh, what's that? She said, yeah, you make shit happen. And I
There
went,
you go.
oh, okay. As a business guy, I kind of like that. There you had it. She
Yeah.
made things beautiful. I made shit happen. Together, we
Mm.
were going to make beautiful shit happen. So
Nice.
on October 2nd of 2015, on that day, I vowed that I would continue to do my best to make beautiful shit happen in this world. And that's why we're having this conversation.
And so that brings me to my next question is, what do you think her impact on you during your relationship had on how you handled the ultimate worst day
Oh,
moment?
yeah. I mean, so much. I mean, again, it was that I'd come out of a 15-year marriage, spent 3 years on my own, and I'd done a lot of personal development growth on my own, but we were both kind of in that same space and growing together. And she just brought that different lens to it. Again, that practice of presence, that for me was the big eye opener. The little practices like acknowledging the clerk at the grocery store by name. Um, that was sort of the first intentional practice that I added. Um, was just being mindful. When I went through the checkout, I read the name tag and I thank them by name. And it's just like all of those little things that aren't so little when you add them. And so, yeah, so that all of that work, and again, the work I'd been doing for the last 20 years had sort of prepared me for, again, I choke even saying that, but it did. It's all brought me to this place.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you, Colleen. And yeah, she sounds amazing. And I'm glad you guys had each other. And yeah, yeah, that's tough. Tough loss for sure.
Well, I and again, sometimes hard to say, but almost everything beautiful is on the other side of something shitty.
You know,
And
yeah,
I can't control the shitty,
no.
but I can control, you can't control the moments
Mhm.
life throws at you. And you touched on this earlier, but you can control the choices you make in those moments.
Yeah, right. And we
And,
have to
and
get through it.
yeah, and who am I to squander what she gave me, the depth of feeling
Yeah.
that I got to experience, as shitty as it was. Like a lot of people will never
Yeah.
feel that deeply.
No. What a gift it
And
is.
that's a gift. That's a gift.
Yeah. You're making good on your promise, man. Like,
Thanks, brother.
good for you, Mike. And not totally not the same situation. I don't want to put it in the same area, but I lost my mother about a year and a half ago, and it was a slow loss, like cancer. We thought we had more time than we did, and things grenaded very suddenly over Christmas. And then it was like, we had her in her own home, and it was like 2 weeks notice for 3 months, like another 2 weeks, the doctors would say. And, you know, like, thank goodness for my recovery and the work I've done over the last 6 years, because it's not affected just the way I am, but it's affected the way I process things, and being able to see the beauty, and the gifts, but also and also experience the heartache and the heartbreak at the same time. Like, I never thought that was something. I thought that was a binary, right? I didn't know
Yes.
I could hold on to those feelings all at the same time and carry them. Um, but by contrast, I lost my father very suddenly when I was 25, and different situation because I was a different person and I had no coping mechanisms, other than drugs and alcohol. Uh, but the gratitude, like all the most beautiful moments I had with my mother in my whole life happened in that 3 months. It felt like it brought family together in a way I had never seen. My sister is a nurse. My daughter is a nurse. Having them come together and watching them be my mother's primary caregivers at home, having them show me how to care for my mother and being open to that and not scared or stubborn, or thinking, no, man, don't do that. Right. Like, you know, and to be safe, and like for my mother to see that I was okay and she didn't need to worry about me, you know, all these things and so much more. But being able to hold that joy in my heart while I'm experiencing that with her in that loss, it just, you know, again, it strengthened my resolve. My mom paid about $35,000 out of her retirement savings for me to go to treatment. And I used to joke with her after completing treatment, like, I'm going to show you how much I can leverage every one of those dollars in service of others, impact our community. And so just to have those moments, you know, 5 years later, to be able to go through that with her, meant so much. And yeah, it's incredible in the end, that like we can feel this stuff and it doesn't have to ruin us, right?
Yeah, and I love that, because that, to me, that's the crux of this entire question about how do we be strong men. And you know, I first heard Brene Brown use the term. Colleen used to always tease me about how badass I was.
Yeah.
And as a guy that had always been more geek than jock, like, it just made me like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was, you know, Brene Brown talked about that perfect combination of tough and tender
Right.
is the exact equation for badassery.
No.
And as dudes, I think sometimes we forget the tender part.
Oh,
And so
absolutely.
I love your framing of being able to hold space for the gift and still experience the pain.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have to ignore the pain. We don't have to, and we're not talking about painting viewing the world through rose-colored glasses and this positivity bullshit.
Yeah.
It's both things can be true. I can be fucking
Absolutely.
devastated, and it can be an incredible gift.
And what, and it takes strength to hold that, to feel that pain. I think
Yes.
avoiding it, I don't think, to me, that's not the definition of masculinity anymore. To me, it's like, if you're tough enough, you can feel your feelings. And that
Yes.
to me is like, you know, I can hold a piece of iron in it with a heavy hand, and I can swing a hammer, and I can do these tough, hard things, but I can hold fragile things gently too. And to me,
Yes.
that's the part, like you were saying, that tenderness that we forget about. I can hold my girlfriend's feelings. I can listen and I can support her without trying to fix it. Because that's uncomfortable for me. I don't like seeing her hurt. It takes strength for me to listen and just sit with that and not try to fix it. That is, to me, a strength I didn't know I had. You know, I have a huge hero complex, right? So, you know, for me to just not try and fix people, but just listen and hold space for them to be, you know, to be open, but also to like know that I need to go and find those spaces and let go of my feelings and like be vulnerable about them too. And, you know, I think it's about mastering the machine. You know, you take any Joe Blow off the street and put them in an excavator and they're going to wreck stuff. Right. And that's what it felt like to be in my body and mind for most of my life. Right. But now I feel like I've just started learning how to operate the machine, how the systems work, how it warms up in the morning, how I need to cool it down in the afternoon. I got to refuel the combat chassis, do the maintenance. And like my gas tank has never been so big. My resilience when shit hits the fan, my steadfastness, my composure, all these things are so much greater than I ever thought they would be, because I'm doing all this stuff that I used to think would not make me weak, would tell other people I was weak. Right?
Yes.
Like, it doesn't make sense, right? How did I get to that place in thinking? Right?
Well, but that's the thing, because it does make sense, because we have been so conditioned to believe that. You know, I always talk about, you know, the importance of learning how to feel. We're not born emotionally disconnected.
No.
We've been conditioned to become that way.
Yeah.
Like, you think of your toddlers when they were little, like my kids sure as hell knew how to express their emotions.
They just feel. Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful.
but as guys, somewhere along the way that gets conditioned out of us. And I remember when I first started having these conversations, my mom used to give me shit. We didn't raise you like that.
Isn't that
I'm
right?
like, no, I know you didn't, Mom, but the rest of the world did.
Yeah. Yeah. I look out across job sites and I just see, guys that are just struggling to find themselves, to be seen, to be heard. They feel very disrespected. They feel like nobody understands what they're going through. But on the other side of it, their part is they're not willing to talk about it with anybody. They're not willing to share their experience. They're fine. They're good. I'm slightly better than excellent. Okay. Well, then don't blame the rest of the world for not understanding you. You're lying to them. And
Totally.
so,
Well, and I think the thing is we also lie to ourselves.
well, exactly.
One of the hardest things to do is to stand in front of that mirror, buck naked, drop the armor,
Right.
drop the mask, and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
who am I, dude?" Like,
Right.
and actually have the courage to do that. But
Yeah.
so tell me what, we get to have these conversations. What do you want? What do you want this podcast to do? What is the message that you want folks to be able to take from this on a regular basis?
And I don't know about you, but in my darkness, I had a habit of believing I was terminally unique, right? Like nobody was more broken than me. Nobody would understand me. And the opposite of that is the connection that is found in, oh, I'm not that different. I'm not broken. I just don't understand my world, my me, my situation, my circumstance, whatever. How about yourself?
Yeah. I love that piece. I think I said something to that effect in my book. You're not as unique as you think you are.
Yeah.
Let keep you humble in the good times and give you strength when the shit hits the fan, like in the bad times.
Yeah.
It's the stories that really move the needle and inspire action. And it's so cathartic too, when you can get to a place where you can share your stories.
Oh,
I
so
run a group.
validating too, right? Like
Yeah.
be given a platform and to say your story is worth something to somebody, and to be able to hold a space like a podcast or an audio or keynote speaking or any forum where you're like, the first time I did it was probably a little too soon. It was about 8 months out of coming out of treatment. But the impact it left on me, for a guy that tells himself that he's worthless and nobody understands and my story doesn't matter and like all this stuff, to stand on stage at that time at the Connection Project and have a theater of people react to what I was saying. You mentioned cathartic. It absolutely was a healing experience for me. And it's hard to like deny that you and your story matter.
And the good news is the story isn't over yet, and I get to write the ending.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, back to the choice piece, that's, the something's got to change. Well, maybe it's you.
Yeah.
Right. You've got the choice. You've got the choice to do that.
Well, I am the problem. And that's what, and getting to a point like where you can look at yourself honestly, all the good, all the bad, and you can take credit for the good, because that's a challenge for me. And you can take credit without shame for the challenging, the tricky stuff. And just understand it's just something that we're all human. I don't suffer from anything anybody else does. I just need to manage certain things about me in order for me to live within my values, to be the dad, the grandfather I want to be. We talk about continuing to make a choice. Like my grandkids, they will have a very different experience with me than my daughters did. And I'm grateful for that. It breaks my heart a little bit. But I have the opportunity to show up differently in my grandchildren's lives. It's not over for me. I still got lots of life, God, if I'm lucky, right? Like I've got lots of life ahead of me and lots of impact to make on the people and loved ones. And it always tore me apart that I wasn't able to show up for my daughters. It nearly killed me, but I couldn't stop. I didn't have the capacity. I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the hope. I didn't have hope, man. I didn't have hope that things could be different.
That's I'm so curious about, how do you hold that without shame? So how do you own the fact that you are not happy about how you showed up for them, without it crippling you.
It did cripple me for many years, but then you realize that shame is selfish. And the pushback I get is it feels selfish to forgive myself. And my argument is that is the least selfish thing you'll ever do, because that's what's going to let you to stand up and be a different person in those people's lives. And so what helps me navigate the shame, and there's lots of regret, there's lots of guilt. Shame is the one that's the rocket fuel in my addiction for me. I navigate the shame by owning the parts I need to own. I'm a selfish person. I can be a very selfish, self-interested person when I'm feeling bad about myself, right? Like, addiction is inherently a selfish disease. People hate it when I call it disease. It is a selfish disorder. I am super self-interested in how the world treats me, how I feel about the world. Do I belong? It's not, I'm worried about other people, right? And so once I'm on those drugs, once I'm in active addiction, I don't have choices left anymore. I don't. This is uncontrollable under my own thing. So if I don't reach out and get help and do those things, that's the person I'm going to be. And people are like, well, I did so many terrible things. I said, do you feel bad about it? Yeah, I'm a terrible person. Would a terrible person feel bad about those things?
Right.
Right. We can start working through the narrative, because a bad person wouldn't care. You care, so you can do better and you can be better. So let's do the work and get there. And then we can let the shame go, because now I'm in a different situation. And that's what we call, like, every day I live my life in a better way. I live in service of others. I give back. I'm a good grandfather. I'm a good dad. It's like an amends to every day that I wasn't there and I wasn't those things. And that's what helps me deal with the shame. I'm not just sitting here not doing drugs, right? My girlfriend, my partner, Han, took me back, and I'm navigating my relationship for the first time in my life as a sober person. And her friends are like, well, after everything he did, why would you take him back? And to hear her say, if you see the amount of work he does to stay healthy, if you saw firsthand the amount of work he does to show up and to be a healthier man, you would have confidence in him too. And so, that's what helps me deal with the shame, because I'm committed to being different, doing different, knowing better and doing better. And I'm not willing, and the honesty I have around with it, that's, my daughters put up with a lot. Both of them missed their father for over a decade. I was out of their life, very non-existent. I was in a state I could honestly answer the phone. They would have loved me to. I know that now. Again, self-interested. I was worried about how I would sound, how they would take it, right? They just wanted to hear their father. They just wanted me to be there in whatever capacity I could. So, understanding what other people need from me, and not blowing it into out of proportion and into something it's not, just understanding the damage I did and just taking responsibility for it. That's all they want. They don't want me to wallow in sorrow and shame, because that's just me being useless.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Trevor,
you can't,
Dad, get over yourself.
You can't show up as the best version of yourself.
Answer the phone, be there at Christmas time. Like, just do the stuff. That's all I ever wanted from me, man. That's all I ever wanted. It was never that complicated like I made it out in my mind.
Yeah, our brains have a way of telling us stories that sometimes are not so true. It was a friend of mine gave me a real gift with a question that I ask myself on a regular basis. And it's simple. And it's just, when I'm faced with a dilemma or a tough situation, I just ask myself, what would the man I want to be do in this situation? And it's so simple, because I always know the answer.
Yeah.
I always know the answer.
We do.
And if I ask myself that question, it makes it a lot harder to do the thing that I shouldn't do, because now it's back to that honesty piece, right? Like, I've put it out there in front of my face, and I actually have to now own whatever the decision is that I make. And if I've asked, what would the man I want to be do? And I say, he'd turn left and I turn right.
Right.
It's like, yeah, dude, that's up to you.
Yeah.
That's got nothing to do with what she did or they did, or that's all on you.
Very similar, very relatable, because I was in my shit. I was like, oh, I want to be this kind of guy. I want to be this guy, but it just felt like it was so far away. And I was like, and I'm this drug addict, living in my mom's basement. And I'm like, this is where I am. And that's the person I want to be. And it's impossible. It's impossible. But nothing's possible if you just don't take that step forward. Right. I think it's like yoga. You never really master it, or enlightenment. You never really get there, but it's the journey of constantly practicing these things that makes life better for you and for other people. Right.
So finding hope and that giant quest to give people hope. So that's my hope for this broadcast, this podcast, is that we can share stories and share hope and build some community, a community of hopefulness.
Cheers to that.